Here now, former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who you saw starring in that soundbite. Good to see you tonight, Sean.
Thanks for the flashback.
I bet. We always say you have a little PTSD probably from some of that experience. So talk to me a little bit about your take on Mike Flynn, because there's two camps on Mike Flynn, that he was wronged or that he never should have been hired in the first place. Where are you?
It's a tough question. I think it all panned out and it worked its way out. But I think Mike Flynn had come on board early when there weren't a ton of supporters standing by the president, and he stood by the president shoulder to shoulder, talking about national security, helping guide the campaign and articulating a national security policy and advising the president. And the president was loyal to him. He had headed the Department of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was highly qualified, a 3-star general, had spent a lifetime in the intelligence community in the Army. And I think the president respected his loyalty and his understanding of the intelligence world.
Any thoughts on this question? And this was after you left, because this is after when the investigation was going on. Who, in Congress or perhaps in the White House or potentially both, Charles Pierce writes in Esquire, the Congress element is a lovely bit of business. Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, Devin Nunes, some as yet unknown administration tool, this, he writes, on someone's staff, the mind reels. What do you say to that, Sean?
Well, I think that, with respect to Flynn, two things come to mind. Number one, there was the comment that you played earlier about General Flynn not being Obama or somebody warning him. And while that was true, we've got to remember the context it was in. After President Obama and every Democrat had accused the president of all sorts of things during the campaign trail, he makes a comment apparently in passing during a meeting that they had. We had plenty of opportunities to be briefed. They had all the intelligence chiefs come up and brief us on January 6th. Why didn't someone pull him aside then? Why didn't one of the intelligence chiefs say, Mr. President, I need to speak with you briefly, privately, as they did on other matters? Why did President Obama not follow up with one of his intelligence chiefs? He had made it clear Obama had fired Flynn. He was clearly not a fan of him. But if it was this big of a deal,
they differed on the strategy for Iraq and Afghanistan. That was, one of the problems.
Correct.
That they
right.
had.
I mean,
it was a policy decision.
Correct. And so it's very hard to turn around after a hard-fought campaign in which you've been very critical of someone and say, hey, by the way, this advisor that I fired that you brought on board, you shouldn't listen to him. You should get rid of him. Yeah. Well, at that point, the president really wasn't taking a ton of cues from the Democratic Party and the Democratic leadership that had lobbed aggressive tactics at him the whole time. So there was plenty of opportunity for the intelligence chiefs who were briefing us on other topics to say, Mr. President, I need to tell you something else. And that never happened. And that's important to know. Now, as far as who that person is, Martha, to your first question, I have no idea who it is. But what I do know is that General Flynn testified extensively to the Mueller team, and the Mueller team conclusively realized at the end that there was no collusion. That's what the important thing is. And we keep going back and nitpicking parts of this report. But all of this stemmed from an accusation that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia.
Well, I want to ask you one more quick question.
2,800...
Which is going to put me over a little bit, so I want to get this in here. This is Chuck Todd talking to the former FBI counsel, James Baker, earlier today. And I just want you to listen to this conversation with regard to when the whole investigation started and these FBI plants and all of that. Listen to this. I just want to get your quick thought on it before we move on.
You had a few FBI informants. I believe you had somebody that working for the FBI and also an informant in Stefan Halper. I understand you.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But this gentleman ended up in the White House for a White House meeting as an FBI informant. At some point, did you think, what have we? That was alarming to me to read that an FBI informant was still sort of actively helping your investigation, but also pretending to be a Trump ally. Do you see why, under that circumstance, perhaps why the president is so paranoid?
I understand why people are concerned about the power of the FBI and some of the investigative techniques that we use, again, without confirming or denying the specifics of what you're saying here. And the point is, what were we trying to do? What were we focused on? Again, I'm saying it again, we were focused on what the Russians were up to, why they were doing it, how they were doing it. We were trying to gather information about that. We weren't trying to gather information about politics or protected First Amendment activities.
What's your reaction to that, Sean?
Well, what I will say is I'm glad that Attorney General Barr in his conversation today with Bill Hemmer made it very clear that he continues to have more and more questions and he wants to get to the bottom of it. the Attorney General is absolutely right. We need to figure out what's going on. If people are all concerned about whether a foreign entity tipped the scale in our election, and we had an extensive report on that, we should be equally concerned, as he said, about government officials trying to tip the scale. And I applaud the Attorney General for what he's doing. And
an FBI informant who's in the White House under the guise of being a Trump ally is a very interesting thing to delve into further.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Sean. Good to see you.
You bet. Thank you.